Now, Executive Suites with WPRI.com reporter Ted Nesi.
They almost tore it down. The Lowe's State Theater was a movie palace when it opened downtown in the roaring 20s, but by the 1970s it had fallen on hard times. That's when a group of local leaders came together to restore the venue, turning it into the modern-day Providence Performing Arts Center, PPAC. And for the last 30 years, one man has been at the center of the PPAC story, Lynn Singleton, overseeing an enterprise that sells more than $12 million a year in tickets to musicals and concerts. This week on Executive Suite, we put the business in show business with the president of the Providence Performing Arts Center, Lynn Singleton. Welcome to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and Lynn, thank you so much for being here.
You're welcome.
Let's start off with, as I said at the top there, 30 years at the helm at PPAC. When you took the job in 1983, did you expect to stay this long?
I had no idea, and actually I've spent most of my adult life in Rhode Island. I've had two incarnations. I moved here initially in 1975, and I worked at Rhode Island College for about 5 or 6 years. And then I left for a couple years, and then I came back to PPAC in 1983.
What's kept you here then?
First of all, it's a great place to live. I think it's totally underrated, and if you live other places and experience other things, you realize that very quickly. It's a very manageable place to live. It's a very good theater town. It's a very good theater market. The facility is a great market. Good board situation, strong governance, support from the city and the state, corporate community, patrons. So it's a combination of things. But I think overall, it's a quality of life that you don't really experience other places.
I want to talk about, I mentioned it at the top, the story that I think as the years go by, more people either forgetting or don't even know about how PPAC was saved. It was not guaranteed that PPAC would still be here as we know it today by any means. And I think the story involves, among others, Bruce Sunland, a woman named Mrs. Dario, and Buddy Cianci. Tell us, what was the story? How did PPAC end up in the form it is today?
Well, I was at Rhode Island College when this all went down, but I certainly can relate it to you. In the late 80s, the Dario family was considering what to do with the building, and one of the considerations was tearing it down. And Mrs. Dario, which was B.A. Dario, who was the owner's wife, she insisted it stay as a theater. And at the time, the mayor was Cianci and the governor was Garrahy. So they combined with what was
the 70s. Though.
This was 1976, 77, somewhere in there. And the Providence Foundation, which still exists, and I think Sunland was the chair of, as many things in the 70s, Sunland was the chair of. They provided the leadership with what at the time were called the Seven Sisters, which were the 4 major banks. See if I can remember them: Old Stone, Citizens, Fleet, and Hospital Trust.
And only one of them still left, and it's a incarnation now.
And Textron, Bill Miller was there then, who went on to be Secretary of Treasury. The Providence Journal, Mike Metcalf, God rest his soul, who was the publisher and the owner of the Journal. And Bruce Sunland, who was the chair of the group and who at the time owned Outlet Communications. And this may have been before your time, but Outlet Communications was down the street in what's now the Johnston Wells Library. So those 7 individuals and the governor and mayor were the original board. And I never forget, I remember I asked Bruce once as I was being interviewed for the job, why of this great august body he was selected as chairman. And Bruce looked at me and said his office was closest. I mean, one of the initial strong public partnerships to downtown, and their motivation beyond the arts and culture of the state was an economic development tool for downtown. Because believe me, in 1975, 76, downtown is not what it is now.
And when you think you came in a few years after that, as I said, 1983, what are the biggest differences? I guess it sounds like the area around it as much as at PPAC itself. What are some of the big differences that come to mind that have changed over the last 30 years?
Residential living, that would be one. When I came back, when I lived in 75, the malls had more or less taken retail out of downtown. So what's happened progressively, and I think PPAC was a player in this, but kind of grew up with downtown. Retail's back in the city, not only at the big mall over near the State House, but even on Westminster Street, retail's back, and that did not exist in the 70s and even the 80s. There was nobody looking to live downtown. Right now, residential rental space downtown is almost non-existent. I think the occupancy rate is 90–95%, so it's very hip to live downtown. There's a very much an arts scene downtown with AS220 and Trinity, and those organizations are thriving. So that all didn't exist. Now we have some inconsistencies. Shepherd's, where CCRI, URI is there. I mean, so we still have some inconsistent area, but we're definitely on the build.
And let's talk specifically about PPAC. When you look around at regional theaters across the country, it's an interesting business. You always see articles about it in different places. You know, how's PPAC doing compared to them? And, you know, I was told by one board member, PPAC bats above its weight, which I think is mixing metaphors now I think about it, but that's what I was told.
Plays above its weight.
Yeah.
That's my wrestling term. Well, first of all, we are the second largest theater in New England, so we have capacity. And when I talk to my board all the time, and I say to my board all the time, you know, at the end of the day, it's all about the shows. Wonderful historic building, you know, we're guardians of the flame with it, but nobody buys a ticket for $100, $70, whatever, and comes down and stands in the lobby. So the first thing, and we have the ability, because of our capacity and because of the market, to attract and bring great shows to town. Because unlike Trinity, we don't produce the show. We're basically, in many ways, a roadhouse, whether we're doing Jay Leno or Wicked. But because of that capacity and because the market, even during bad times, has responded well and we're able to sell tickets, you know, people come to shows and, you know, we've been enormously successful. Now you have to learn the market and know you shouldn't be doing Phantom of the Opera in July here because people don't want to be downtown, they want to be at the beaches. But it's you know, we've been blessed with a great facility and a good market, and we've been able to capitalize on it.
And when you think about, you know, it's easy for someone who lives in Rhode Island or in Providence to think, well, there's no competition for PPAC because there's nothing like PPAC anywhere near it. But you got Boston up the road and other places. I mean, do you look around and see a competitive landscape for the kind of shows you bring in and what you do?
Well, you have a whole portfolio of shows. The initial Broadway, you know, we are where the train arrives and leaves in the state of Rhode Island. We compete somewhat with Boston, but at a different level. But on all the one-nighters, we compete with the Connecticut casinos. Give you an example. We compete with.
So that's like Tony Bennett coming in March, or when Diana
El
Ross came.
Divo, Diana Ross. So I mean, and it's New England. A lot of people live close by, big market. Interesting enough, because we just did. We're in the process of vetting an economic impact study for the building and for the 3 shows we opened, and 60% of the we do 300 to 350,000 people in a year's time. 60% of those people come from Rhode Island, but 40% of those people don't. They come from other places. And one of the seminal events in the history of our building was in the mid-90s. We discovered when Phantom was going to tour the first time that we had this big house, but it was a movie theater, so we had a short deck. So we pushed the wall back 12 feet. We raised $7 million. The board, city, state, and corporate and individuals chipped in. And we pushed the wall back. Prior to pushing that wall back, if you went and looked in a year's time, 14% of the credit card slips that were theater tickets that were sold in Boston were Rhode Islanders. Today it's 6%.
Wow, so you can see that impact.
We took our market back because people, quite honestly, they'd rather be here, but they need to have the comfort that they're seeing the same thing here they're seeing other places.
And as you said, it's all about the show as well. We have to take a break. When we come back, we're going to talk more about the business of show business at PPAC and what lies in the future for the storied theater downtown. Stick with us on Executive Suite. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nesi, and my guest this week is Lynn Singleton. He's been the president of the Providence Performing Arts Center, PPAC, for the last 3 decades, and he's seen a lot. I'm curious, and you have a vantage that many executives don't about their organization. How would you describe PPAC's health today, both financially and in terms of audience and engagement?
It's solid, but we're in a risky business because the one thing that makes us unique as a facility, as I always tell people, we're always the last person that gets paid. We buy the talent, we pay for the advertising, we pay for the labor bill, and hopefully at the end of the day we make a few dollars and keep ourselves alive. And then if we have an excess of revenue over expenses, naturally with a building built in 1928, you always got something to fix. And so we either put it back in the building or we put it into a reserve. But like most theaters, it's you're always on the edge. In some years they're a little better, in some years they're a little worse. And so, my line is, we run like a portfolio of entertainment, and so it's kind of like stock. Some days you expect GE to go up and it goes down. So you have to be in it for the long run. And fortunately, we've done well in the long run over a period of years.
And have you had to make adjustments with the weak economy? Rhode Island in particular has had a weak economy, though, as you said, you're in a way an export because you're bringing people in from out of state as well. I mean, what's the last few years been like in that sense?
We were blessed in that in the Broadway world, we very much deal in the future tense. Like I'm already like 2.5 years out. So before the world tried to end, as I say, we had in place a number of, the term I use is tentpole shows that kind of hold up the season. We had Lion King and Jersey Boys. And so we had those in place. So we had retail things that people make choices. But so they were going to see, if they were going to do one thing that year, they would go see Jersey Boys. So that helped us. Where our business like went to ground, and we picked up on it very quickly, and fortunately we did too, is the one-nighter business, the Steve Miller bands and the Tony Bennett's and the shows that draw from a wider circulation of the population and are expensive. Those shows suddenly, your break even was on a margin, a very small margin. We learned very quickly people were just keeping those dollars in their pocket. So over a period of about 2 or 3 years, we stayed out of that business sector. Interesting enough, we're back in that business sector. We have shows this spring, and our one-nighters this spring, and the one-nighters we've had previously this year, few because we've opened so many tours and don't have the availability, have been very strong, not only on sale, but at the end of the day. So that, to me, people are, they're not as concerned and they're not as careful. So they'll spend an evening out. They're coming out, but it's a very competitive business.
You mentioned ticket prices there. This always gets brought up. How do you balance the price of a ticket and what you need to break even with making sure it's affordable and available to younger people in particular, your future subscribers, who you hope as they get a better income they're able to subscribe, but you need to start them on the path?
Fortunately with Broadway, because when we do a show, we do a week. So you have 8 performances, about 25,000 tickets, and you have a large, menu of prices all the way from, the front of the plane, which is the first class section down front, which is called the Golden Circle, all the way to the top. And our second balcony, the second dress circle, you can buy a ticket for a Broadway show as cheaply. Phantom was $25. Now down front, in the first, where you get sweated on, the first 10 or 15 rows was probably $125. But so that type of entertainment, because you have so much capacity, the same way existed for Wicked, because I know we had a performance on New Year's Eve and maybe even New Year's Day. I think the balcony tickets were in the $20 because there was so much competition for the dollar. So you can afford a ticket, you just have to be willing to make compromises in where you sit.
And what are you excited about with the remainder of this season and going into, well, you can't say next season yet, right? You announced that with some brouhaha, but what are you excited about the rest of this year?
My marketing director would kill me.
Yeah.
Actually, this spring we close out the year, I think it's late April, with Book of Mormon, which is not your traditional Broadway audience. It's doing very well. We've been on sale about a couple of months, right before Christmas. It was written by the creators of South Park. We have 2 weeks of it, and you cannot buy a ticket in New York, and if you can, it's $350, $400. It's selling well not only locally, but we're doing a lot of business regionally.
Sure, yeah.
So, because I notice one thing that makes us unique is we operate our own phone room. So I'll walk by the operators and I'll look down and I see a lot of area codes on those phones that aren't 401.
That are outside of here.
People are driving.
And talking to you and members of the PPAC board, as I said, there's a surprising amount of emphasis also on the importance of PPAC for the economy, for the people who work at PPAC and bringing people into town. I mean, what's your pitch on that? Does PPAC provide a lot of jobs? How many people does it take to put that place together?
Well, we're, and you mentioned this earlier, we are depending on the year, a $12 to $15 million business. But the important number is we attract 300 to 350,000 patrons a year. And it takes people to service all those patrons. And we provide, we're kind of plug and play. If when Phantom came and teched out for 5 weeks and did the opening of the tour here, the local labor bill, people who were Rhode Island stagehands, was $750,000, real money. And it's studies done, years spent by the National Touring Broadway League. It shows that a theater patron spends on average $75 to come to the theater on the ticket price. Mm-hmm. So if you take, we just did Wicked. So we did 72,000 people in 3 weeks, the day after Christmas through into New Year's. Now, trust me, there would have been nobody downtown during those 3 weeks. We did 72,000 people. If you believe the statistics that the National Touring Broadway League has given us, which have been researched and verified, those 72,000 people spent $75 each in the downtown economy during a time that they wouldn't have been here. And trust me, they wouldn't have spent it somewhere else because they'd have been home cocooning because the weather was cold, storm alert, snow.
Right. We were on TV scaring them.
Yeah, so we brought them down, and that's the other thing, and that's so we are in many ways a generator. Have been way before I got there, since the early '70s, and will continue to be. And so that's a very positive for the city and state.
All right, we have to take another break. When we come back, more on the business of show business with PPAC President Lynn Singleton. Stick with us. Welcome back to Executive Suite. I'm Ted Nisi, and we're talking today about the business of show business with PPAC President Lynn Singleton. And Lynn, just a few years ago, the General Assembly changed state law so that the tax credits that until then had been only available for movies and TV shows in Rhode Island could also apply to big big Broadway productions. And I know that's been an important thing for PPAC. Tell me about the impact of that. Has it been what you expected? What's it doing?
Well, historically, it wasn't an original thought. The state of Louisiana, after Katrina, did a $100 million entertainment tax credit. So, and a number of shows we were talking to suddenly were opening tours in Louisiana. So I drilled down, and that's what they had done. They had taken their film tax credit and they had extended it to make eligibility include opening of pre and post Broadway. So what we suggested, and what was thanks to the governor and the General Assembly was passed, was that we took the existing film tax credit and we extended the eligibility. We did not increase the amount of money, because what we discovered in our research is they were funding about $15 million a year and they were spending 11 to 12, so it was quote unquote budget neutral, which was, that's always helpful, and it was a very tough time. So we took that arrow in our quiver. That, combined with the geographical location of Rhode Island, most of the artistic people who are involved in these shows live and work in New York. We're very easy to get to. We're very user-friendly. We have a well-trained, experienced labor force, good theater, good market. We've been blessed, and this year we opened in order, which was quite an experience. 3 national tours. We opened up the National Tour of Evita in September. We opened up the Tony Award-winning musical Once in October, and we recently completed in, I think, early December, after 5 weeks of tech, the national tour of Phantom of the Opera.
And that's a big deal to open a big national tour here at your facility, right, in your business?
Well, one of the major missions, as I perceive it, and I think our board perceives it at PPAC, is being an economic generator, and that what it helps us double down on that. And it really levels the playing field. And not that we're going to open every tour, but every tour that thinks about where we're going to open, we get a call. So we have the opportunity to make the pitch. With Phantom, if we had not opened Phantom, Boston would have played it first, and we would have been 2.5 years down the road to play the show. So it gives us a slight competitive advantage. At the end of the day, the dollars that are generated in the tax credit goes to the producers to help underwrite his costs, and hopefully what happens, the economic generator of jobs in the community and the advertising spend, et cetera, helps to offset that tax credit.
And what goes into deciding when you're looking at a season? I assume you mentioned before tent poles. You need certain shows you know are going to be a big draw. Maybe those you take chances on. How do you make that decision about what to put together, and also how much of it's in your control?
Well, certain shows are no-brainers. It doesn't take a genius or rocket scientist to know you should do Lion King. And then certain shows are like, no, that's a bad idea. And then so you're left with what I call the middle. And sometimes the middle fits better, Sister Act, because this is a heavily Catholic state, was a no-brainer. It's and a lot of it is routing and how it plays, and time of the year. One of the most difficult times of the year was what I call the shoulders, and that's September and June, because if you're doing a show in September, and we had this issue with Evita, you're running your advertising in August. The other caveat is next fall, this is probably in the weeds a little bit, next fall we're going to have this enormous governor's race, and they're going to buy a lot of TV, so I couldn't buy a TV spot if I tried, so I will stay away from September. So you try to, it's not an exact science. Yeah. If it was, everybody would be doing it. But so you fill your way along, and hopefully at the end of the day, and they're not all winners, and at the end of the day you hope, and you try to offer what I call a balanced season. So if you have one revival, you don't want three. You can do West Side Story, but then if you do that, you can't do Anything Goes and South Pacific. You want a new show that's been on Broadway and is fresh. So you try, because we have a season ticket program. And this is another interesting business fact. During the last 4 or 5 years, our season ticket base, as last year, bottomed this is for a week, at about 6,500. This season, we're back up over 8,000. That's a very good sign, because a pair of season tickets, give or take, is between, for 6 or 7 shows, whatever, is about $800 to $1,000. So that's a major investment in dollars, but it's also a major investment in time.
So we only have 30 seconds left. Is there a show you've never been able to bring in that you want to, your white whale, something you want to get?
Oh, that's a good question.
I'm a good interviewer.
Is there a show? I always wanted to do Hugh Jackman. I don't know if you know who he is.
Yeah,
yes, yeah. But not a lot of people know him as a performer. They know him as the Wolverine. He did a one-man show called The Boy from Oz, and he is not only one of the most charming men alive, but he is one of the best performers, and he would make a world-class entertainment evening.
All right, well, we'll watch to see if Lynn Singleton can get Hugh Jackman into PPAC. Lynn, thank you so much for being here this week, and thank you for tuning in to Executive Suite. If you missed any of this episode or any other episode, you can catch all of those on our website, WPRI.com. Be sure to join us again next week when my guest will be Swipely CEO Angus Davis. Thanks again for tuning in.
Good job.